Thank you so much, Megan. I saw somebody from as far away as North Carolina. I think that might be the furthest today. We've had people from as far away as Alaska tuning in for CP Community Live. So it's always fun to see who's joining us around the country. But as Megan said, I'm going to talk to you about building hobbies today. But I want you to, just for this session, I want you to think about hobby, uh, the concept of a hobby in sort of a different framework. So we're going to think about a hobby as something that we can do, in this case, to foster a different way of thinking and being and feeling. And so we're going to talk about fostering positivity and inner peace today. So first of all, just to as a reminder of the definition of positivity, it's a noun meaning the practice of being positive or optimistic in attitude. And I think the key word here is practice. And so that's what we want to really kind of investigate today is how do we make this practice of being optimistic or positive? How do we kind of turn that into a hobby? And make it a real habit. So I want you to just take a minute here and look over this little chart. It describes the big differences on balance between optimists and pessimists. People who, on balance, think of themselves as optimistic and positive thinking, and then people who are more pessimistic in nature and think more negatively. So some general qualities are that optimists tend to take uh, more risks because they see the positive potential. For pessimists, they're less likely to take risks because they see the potential failure more clearly. And optimists see bad times as temporary. Pessimists tend to see problems as permanent. Optimists generally don't think of their problems as global. They don't generalize their problems. But pessimists definitely do that, and they blow small things up into bigger ones. Optimists usually don't take things personally. Pessimists sometimes take things more personally. Optimists tend to be more trusting, and pessimists tend to be less trusting. So I want you, if you'll just put in the chat which which category most of the time you think you fall into. And I think for a lot of us, we have kind of a combination of these traits. But when you think of yourself, what's your primary outlook? Do you think you're more of an optimist or a pessimist? And it's very interesting to me because I asked this question at the cognitive empowerment program in our Live Well classes when we talk about this concept. And it's always interesting to me the balance of optimists versus pessimists in the room. The percentage is usually about half and half, or maybe slightly more optimists than pessimists. So I just want you to, this is just to get our juices flowing about, your basic outlook. So the degree to which you are a positive thinking person or more of a negative person a lot of times depends on your background. If you come from a family, for example, and you grow up, say your parents were really super optimistic and positive thinking, that often rubs off on people, and the opposite can also be true. So that can play a big factor in your outlook, is your the way you grew up, the way that the people around you saw the world. But you also have to think that your outlook about the rest of the world also has to do a lot of times with how you see yourself as well. And research tells us, and we'll look at this more in a minute, that positive thinking has a lot of benefits as opposed to negative thinking. And one of the most important things for our population, when we're working with people with a diagnosis of mild cognitive impairment and their families and care partners, that is an inherently stressful situation. And positivity and positive thinking is one of the most cited aspects of good stress management. So people who are able to be more optimistic and think positively deal with stress better, which is a really good reason to make this a hobby. And again, if you tend to be more pessimistic, this is a practice that you can develop and eventually learn and be more natural at thinking more positively. I got a heart. All right. All right. So we do want to just reiterate though that we don't want to be too overly positive. We want to strive for realistic or what's sometimes called practical optimism. So the goal is to think positively but realistically. Realistic optimism is the idea that you do have to pay attention to the negative information that's relevant to what's going on, but you choose not to stay focused on that negative information because there's almost always positive information that you consider as well. Another aspect of practical optimism is that you recognize and affirm that you can have good and positive and negative emotions coexist. And the goal is to think about why you're feeling the negative things and what's underneath that, and remind yourself to see the good things. And so what we're really talking about at the root of this is the way that you interpret the things in your life that happens to you. So, if something bad happens, we have to remind ourselves that this is usually something that won't last forever. But when something good happens, give yourself credit and feel grateful for people that helped make that a good thing for you. So it's really changing the way that you talk to yourself and interpret the things that happen to you. We'll talk more about that in a minute. And again, there are a lot of benefits to thinking more positively. And these little bullet points represent a body of research. And some of the studies indicate that positive thinking may increase people's lifespan, actually. People who live longer tend to be positive thinkers, interestingly. Also, positive thinking suggests that people have lower rates of depression, lower levels of stress and distress, better overall psychological and physical well-being. Their cardiovascular health is better, and they have a lowered reduced risk of death from cardiovascular disease. And again, as we've referred to before, people who think positively generally have better coping skills during hardships and times of stress. I have a theory about this next to the last bullet: better cardiovascular health and reduced risk of death from cardiovascular disease. I think if my theory is that if you're a positive thinker, you think, you know what, if I get out and exercise and eat right and try to really have a healthy lifestyle, that is going to help me. It's going to make me feel better. It's going to make me live longer. It's really going to work. Whereas a pessimist might think, you go out and run a mile and then, you die anyway. So I think we're more inclined to believe that interventions that we take will have good outcomes. That's my theory. All right. And again, this positive thinking doesn't mean that we're ignoring the negative. But again, this concept of self-talk is really a good place to start with this practice, this habit of being more positive. So when I say self-talk, it's the conversation that you have in your head with yourself. It's listening to your thoughts, sort of. What's your inner dialogue like? Are you saying to yourself, "This is terrible"? That's self-talk. Even if you're not saying it directly to yourself, it's about the language that's going on in your head. And sometimes that self-talk, what we're thinking comes from logic, and other times it's not logical. it comes from past habits or patterns, or because you've had bad experience in a certain area, or because you just lack information. So, we want to try to shift the balance of positive thoughts to negative thoughts. And if you do notice yourself thinking more negatively, like if I'm thinking, this is, I look at my calendar in the morning and I think, oh my gosh, I've got too many meetings. This is going to be a terrible day and I'm not going to get anything done. I could change that around and say, you know what, I do have a lot of meetings today, but I'm sure that it's going to be a really productive day. I'm going to get a lot done. And what I don't get done today, we'll hit it tomorrow. So that's the general idea, the basic idea behind changing your self-talk. Now, as we start to be more aware and practice this shift in our self-talk, um, I want you to start to be aware about whether or not you exhibit some of these really common, and just about all of us do these things at some point or another, but these are common forms of negative self-talk. So the first one is filtering. So just in a nutshell, you're mostly thinking about the negative aspects of a situation and you're not thinking about the positive things. These bullets come from the Mayo Clinic, by the way. And then personalizing. If something bad happens, you blame yourself. You think it's your fault. And then catastrophizing. You automatically anticipate the worst. You start off on the wrong foot in the morning and you just think the whole day is going to be terrible. And then polarizing. We especially these days, I think a lot of times people see things as bad or good, black or white. There's no middle ground. There's no gray area. So one of the effects that this kind of thinking can have is that it makes you feel like you have to do everything exactly right or you failed. I'm sure many of you here today identify probably as perfectionists or really type A people who expect a lot of yourselves. And if you're not doing things up to your own standards, you think you've totally failed. And if that is you, if I'm speaking to you, I want you to try to turn that around and recognize the positive and the good things that you do, and not make it all or nothing. It doesn't, none of us are perfect. You're never going to be absolutely perfect. So just give yourself a break. All right. So here's some tips about how to start this practice. Because we're creating a new hobby here. Remember, we're going to have this new hobby of being positive, being more positive. So first of all, a good place to start is identifying areas to change. If there is a particular person, task, event, relationship that you generally think more negatively about, you can start to focus on that and think about, again, what's underneath that? And what are some of the things that I might be able to change to start to change my attitude and my self-talk about that negative area? And if you try to start on every, do apply this to every negative thought you have, that's a lot. So this is a good way to start by just do it small and identify one thing and practice on that change in thinking. And then the second tip here is to check yourself periodically throughout the day and really think to yourself, what was I just saying to myself? What was my inner dialogue just like? And if you're finding that, oh, wow, I was just saying to myself, you know, this is, this is horrible, something is terrible, you stop and think, how can I change that and put a positive spin on that? Because if you're not checking yourself from time to time and not paying attention to it, it's really hard to change. So sometimes when in our Live Well classes at the Cognitive Empowerment Program, we actually have people write in their calendars little reminders or put it in their phone to do a mindfulness check uh, at different times during the day, and check yourself and listen to your inner dialogue and see if there's a way that you can turn your negative thoughts around a little bit. And then this one is super important. Be open to humor. Give yourself permission to smile or laugh during difficult times. And we stress that for our the participants in our program, the people with MCI and their care partners. We say it's okay to, as long as you're not laughing at someone, it's okay to laugh. And it's encouraged to laugh together. And I think that people who are able to find a way to do that generally cope better. And it's a really good stress management technique for sure. And then we're going to start practicing positive self-talk. Um, don't say anything to yourself that you wouldn't say to anybody else. So you wouldn't say something unkind to most of the people that you really care about. So think about, I'm not going to say anything unkind to myself because I wouldn't say that to somebody else that I love. So I'm not going to say I'm to myself, I'm really stupid for doing that. Um, you could say instead, I made a mistake, but I learned from that, and I'm going to do better next time. Be gentle and encouraging to yourself. And if a negative thought does enter your mind, which it will, just evaluate it and replace it with your affirmations. Think about what you're thankful for. That's a great way to get started on positive self-talk. And then this concept of following a healthy lifestyle, there's some research that indicates that, you know, this this concept of thinking positively really is affected by your overall health. Your ability to, be optimistic and think positively is sometimes very interdependent on your physical health. So, you gotta do the exercise that you can do for your situation. You can break it up during the day if you want to, but of course, this has tons of benefits, but especially one of the main ones and one of the important ones is what we're talking about today is its effect on positivity. And then I love this one, surround yourself with positive people. I think most of us probably have people in our lives who Megan sometimes calls them energy vampires. They kind of suck the energy out of you, and when they leave you feel more depleted than you do nourished or enriched. And that's just the nature of some people. And if you can surround yourself more often with people who give you more energy than they take, that is much more healthy. And I know that sometimes we have people in our lives who are on balance negative and kind of influence our outlook, that we don't have a lot of choice about, the degree to which we can stay at arm's length. But I think this is an important thing to think about because often this is a big stressor for people, having people in your lives that are not positive folks. Find the people that make you laugh. And so just thinking about putting this into practice, these are just some examples from Mayo about negative self-talk versus positive self-talk and how you can change your thoughts instead of saying, I'm just not getting any better at this, or I'm never going to get any better at this. That you can change that into, you know what, maybe that wasn't successful, but I'll give it another try. And you can see these examples. And what I'd like for you to do is really think about, for your own situations, writing down, make a little list and write down the thoughts that you have either recurrently or if, as things occur to you, as you think them, and then actually write down how you can, change that thought into a more positive thought. And just the act of writing these things down can really help you to put this into practice. So this is a nice tool here. All right, now we are going to talk about making a hobby out of striving for inner peace, which is related to positivity, but it's a little bit different. Inner peace is a state of being mentally and spiritually at peace with enough knowledge and understanding to keep yourself strong in the face of stress. That stress word keeps popping up. It's also defined as a state of mind where calmness and satisfaction exist even in the presence of stress or discord. And I love this quote from Wayne Dyer. Peace is the result of retraining your mind to process life as it is rather than as you think it should be. And those shoulds are really what get us into trouble sometimes. There's a saying an old saying among counselors and therapists, thou shalt not should on yourself. Try to get that out of your language and try to accept things as they are rather than as you think they should be. They must be this way. And that helps you bring inner peace. All right. I love this little cartoon here. Come on, inner peace. I don't have all day. Being impatient is clearly not the way to achieve inner peace. But here are some additional sort of research findings about people who report that they feel peaceful, that they have this quality of inner peace. They say they're able to concentrate better. They feel like they're able to handle their day-to-day lives better. They're more efficient at dealing with tasks and more difficult things. They say that they feel more powerful and strong when they feel peaceful. They feel like they're more patient, more tolerant, and more tactful, which makes complete sense to me. Because if you're not feeling peaceful, it's really difficult, again, to be patient and tolerant and tactful with other people. And then people report that their stress is less, and they're not as anxious and they don't worry as much, which I think is it's such a common plague that we share, right? We all have things that we worry about so much. If we could worry less and stress less, we'd be much more healthy. And then people also report that they sleep better when they feel this quality of inner peace. You may have seen this kind of famous quote attributed to the ancient Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. And this is a generalization, but you'll see the meaning behind this. If you're depressed, you're living in the past. If you're anxious, you're living in the future. If you're at peace, you're living in the present. So that just gives you some food for thought there. And I do think there's some truth to that. All right. So at CEP, here's some powerful practices that we do to help instill a sense of inner peace in people. And we are really trying to instill these as not just practices, but hobbies that people enjoy at CEP. Everybody loves Megan's yoga classes, in which she incorporates mindfulness. The two naturally go together, but it's just a beautiful blend. And people are always reporting to us that her classes and our Tai Chi classes led by Tina are really helpful to them in coping with their day-to-day stress and their intrusive thoughts that they might have. And I think they're just a beautiful example of how these practices really do translate into what we're talking about today, about inner peace and positivity. And of course, physical activity. And we do a lot of that at CEP, and we've talked about the many, many benefits of that. So I wanted to give you just a few other helpful habits. We want to look at these as things that we're going to start looking at more as hobbies, because they really just give you a good feeling in so many different ways. I'm going to start in the middle here with journaling, because that is a hobby that people often pick up during their time at CEP, because we do talk about it during our sessions, and they find that it doing either a life review or just kind of documenting your present day has a really, really powerful and positive effect on their lives. And so I think of all of these, that's one of the most important ones. But just on a smaller scale, people that we work with say that keeping a schedule and a calendar and just knowing what's happening day to day really helps them feel less stressed and more peaceful. Also, slowing down and take one thing at a time. You know, we're all in such a hurry and we're trying to multitask. And if we would just slow down, I think that in itself is a big help. And then simplifying your space, decluttering. There's a lot of uh, research that suggests that it increases our cognitive reserve when we declutter and simplify our space. We know where everything is. We're not expending energy looking for things, and we're not just having that stimulation all the time. Oh my gosh, there's stuff everywhere. So that's important. I feel like because I facilitate support groups that they're a really, really helpful tool to kind of feel more peaceful as you investigate your feelings, get things off your chest, get inspiration from other people. I think that's a very powerful practice and a great hobby almost. And then finally, investigate what gives you purpose and meaning in life. Um, this is a big focus of our Live Well classes where we talk about, finding opportunities to do the things that give you purpose and meaning. And sometimes that takes a little bit of work on the front end to figure out what is that and how am I going to make that happen? Like, if you've always wanted to do, you're interested in art, you've always wanted to take an art class, and you have to figure out where the classes are, how much they cost, and how you're going to get there. But once you do it and experience it, wow, that can give you real purpose and meaning in life. I use that example because that happened to me. And that's enriched my life so much. Okay, a few additional practices. Practice forgiveness. It's really important that you just take a look at what the things that you're holding on to and see if some of those things you might not be able to let go of or think more positively about. Relatedly, don't get caught up in the negative, live in the present, learn to ignore things that aren't worth your emotional energy. You know, sometimes if you're expending energy on something and you're angry about something, that just hurts you more than anything else. So again, try to let go of some of that. Practice kindness and compassion. Be intentional about treating other people with kindness and compassion. Commune with nature. That's a big one for me. Find sources not just of purpose and meaning, but of nourishment, like your spirit, going to your place of worship, spirituality, whatever that looks like for you, and what nourishes your spirit and your soul. Practice gratitude. I have a friend who every day writes something on a slip of paper that she's grateful for that day and puts it in a jar. And at the end of the month, she reads all of her little slips of paper. And that's a powerful practice for her. And then I love this last one: maintain your curiosity about life and be open to learning new things. Lifelong learning is really important, I think. All right. So I want you to think about, as we close here, what do you use currently to help foster your own inner peace? And hopefully this presentation today has given you some ideas about other things that you can do, some hobbies that you can take on, some practices that you can start to really start being more positive and feel a sense of inner peace.